So we got a new Nicolas Cage movie that came out called Mom and Dad, and I haven't seen many of Nicolas Cage's recent movies in the past couple years. Because the thing I've noticed about his movies recently is that they've been either direct to video or they just look god awful in terms of quality. And I know that Nicolas Cage, he's been in good stuff, but he's not one that's always been in great quality movies. But like they are stretching in terms of the movies I've seen come out before this that look like the worst, like Left Behind, like that looked like one of the worst movies ever. Like just looking at that movie, like how it looks, how it is acted. And I mean Nicolas Cage is one of those actors that can pull something from something shitty and make it entertaining. Not saying good, but entertaining. But that's why I haven't seen a lot of his movies recently. But then I saw Mom and Dad, this movie that was coming out at my local indie theater, and it looks theatrical and looked better than a lot of the movies he's recently been in, um, or the ones that are where he's like the lead. So I was kind of getting excited. Like this looks like a better made movie than a lot of the shit he's been having out in the past couple of years. So it was interesting that I like looking at the trailer for this, looking at it looked really funny, it looked really interesting, but the movie itself was just like it had fun moments. Like it's not terrible. Honestly, in terms of Nicolas Cage performances, I think this isn't terrible. It's his typical Nicolas Cage shtick, um, but it makes it more entertaining than the movie would have been without it. As opposed to say something else he's done recently, where like it's just terrible regardless of if he's in it. This one I feel like wouldn't have been terrible if he wasn't in it, but it would have been just lackluster. And in this one, he is pretty funny. He is really like the movie is marketed straight up as a horror movie. Like online, it says it's a horror thriller. It doesn't say anything about a comedy, but don't let them fool you with a Nicolas Cage movie because, of course, Nicolas Cage does his freakouts. He does his random ass things that are funny, but just so random. He is really funny in this movie, but the movie itself, I think, is it's fine. I think it knows what it is, even though it's not marketed as a comedy. It should have been marketed as a comedy too because it's very incoherent in terms of like why people do things. Like for example, the plot of this movie is about all these adults, just this random epidemic, never explained. These adults just start becoming violent and killing their kids or hurting their kids. I don't think it was ever explained. They just sort of just out of nowhere try to kill him. And that makes me think that this movie knew exactly what it's trying to be. Like it's just trying to be something silly and over the top. And it definitely was, especially with Nicolas Cage. But like for example, there's one scene that like you cannot call this a straight up horror movie if like you have a scene where Nicolas Cage imagines himself with another actor as young Nicolas Cage in a car drifting while he's got a woman with her breast bouncing off his face while he is just sitting there in a dazed look. Like that is not a scene that would be just in a horror movie, and it's not marketed as a horror comedy. But that scene was the funniest scene I thought in the movie, where it was young Nicolas Cage with the girl and her boobs flying around on his face while he's just doing drifts, and it's so random, which makes it so funny because it's so out of nowhere. Like you didn't even. The only thing you could have gotten before that scene was he said that he wished he was younger. But like it was stretching, but it was a funny like 2 seconds of the movie. But Nicolas Cage is funny in the movie. He is, and then there's some times where I'm just like, okay, he's trying way too hard. But I think it also makes sense because he's done this shtick for a long time. So it's like, how much of the same can you do after so many of these same kind of freakouts? And let me talk about this one scene, and I won't spoil it, but there's one scene in this movie that's a flashback, and I'm wondering what the only reason why this is in the movie is because they had to have a Nicolas Cage freakout scene. Like there's literally no reason for this scene to exist, because you could have explained it in dialogue, like something happened before this scene, before the flashback. You could have just explained it. But no, you needed to do a flashback with Nicolas Cage and Selma Blair, and then he has a freak out. And that worked good on the trailers, because then in the trailers, whenever he sings the Hokey Pokey, that's the scene I'm talking about, it would look like he's doing that to kill the kids, but then no, it's just a flashback where he's just having a random mass freak out. So it's pointless, but I knew they purposefully did that just to have the Nicolas Cage freak out. What is the point of that scene? And if you saw this, then you know which scene I am talking about. But I won't spoil it in case you haven't seen it. But the movie, like I said, doesn't follow any real life rules. It's just like the adults just start going crazy. They just act out for no reason, and like it feels like it's purposefully trying to be this kind of cult, funny horror movie, even though it's not marketed as a comedy, but it's trying to be just a cult, like, funny movie. And without spoiling this either, it has one of the most abrupt, like, endings I've seen in a long time. Like, there is somebody saying a line, and it doesn't even finish this line before the movie ends. And I was just like, did they run out of money? Are they done with the scene? Like, why did they just immediately cut out? That to me was so dumb. But the movie overall, like, it's not terrible, it's not great. Again, it's just like, I feel like it's just right in the middle. It's not anything great, but it's not anything to where I hated it. I just watched it, thought it was fun. There were fun moments about it. It's, of course, I pointed out stuff like it's not realistic, but I think it is what it is. This movie is just trying to be something really silly and fun. It's just like an escapism kind of movie. It's just like a dumb, stupid movie that's just fun to watch and entertaining. And Nicolas Cage, even though he's not doing anything different than what he's done before, it looks like this is a better choice than doing a lot of those shitty direct-to-video or low-budget movies that were sent to theaters. So, overall, I think that this movie itself was just alright. It had some okay moments. Nicolas Cage was fine, but overall, it was just mediocre.